This session, everyone who's just joining. This is on collaborating across jurisdictions, but also across sectors, across partners, across communities. And for today's session, we have two really great speakers. Just to introduce myself first, my name is Marguerite Harden. I am with the Colorado Resiliency Office, and I have been managing for the past year and a half regional program, a regional planning process across 16 different regions within the state that represent over 150 jurisdictions. So this process, which we've called the Resiliency Roadmaps process, I might refer to throughout the presentation. Stephanie is a great partner there, and John, I know, is also aware. And so that's just one example that we have been learning from. For those of you who don't, and if you could advance, James, great. So yeah, it's just some housekeeping. If you're not speaking, please turn your camera off until we stop presenting, but feel free to use the chat. There is no Q&A feature, it's really just the chat. And we will have an opportunity for questions as well as participation through that Jamboard and unmuting. So if we want to just jump right into the session now. That next slide, great. So we all heard the topic here is really around this disaster knows no political boundaries. And for anyone who has studied resiliency or resilience theory, it's really rooted deeply and refers to networks and social cohesion as one of the more intangible aspects of what resiliency is. It's really hard to measure how effective your partnerships are. It's really hard to measure that kind of progress, but it's a really integral part of resiliency. And what defines, for example, if it's post-Sandy and you have communities providing extension cords for everyone to charge their cell phones versus perhaps Katrina type situation where there's looting. These social networks and these cohesion is a really important part of resilience, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. So if we want to advance to that next slide. I want to ground ourselves in what a region is, and then I'll talk about what the benefits of a region are before I pass it off to our speakers, who are going to really talk more about the how they have worked regionally and how it's been really successful. But really, what is a region? It is sometimes very fluid. There is no one real definition. It is a collaboration across systems, across jurisdictions, across communities, etc. And in this bottom right-hand corner, you can see a map of our basins, our water basins, which we also know the continental divide goes right through Colorado. I mean, our water either goes to the Atlantic or the Pacific. Like, there's a lot of different ways to define even the region of water. But that on this slide is the only example of a natural boundary. All these other examples of what is a region are human defined. So in the top left, you have how DOLA, our organization breaks up the regions within Colorado. You can see in the top right, our education systems. In the bottom left, we have COGS, or the Council of Governments map, which does define the regions that John and I believe Stephanie have. And then, of course, transportation systems have their own regions based on how we've developed and the infrastructure that we have. And this is just one example. For the Regional Roadmaps program, we've allowed communities to define their own regions, to see who they want to partner with, which really has its benefits too. But, what we're going to talk about today is how do we have fluent and well-worked systems that work regionally, and what defines those regions, and how do you get them to work together well? If we don't go to the next slide. And of course, this is just a few of the benefits of regional collaboration that I have seen. Of course, shared challenges can lead to shared solutions, which lead to that collaboration that make you be able to go further, better. And in this right-hand corner of the slide, you can see scaling, which I know is an important part of Stephanie's housing program, right? Reaching not just economies of scale, but also the efficiencies that come along with reaching those economies of scale to, for example, attract a developer for a housing project. Of course, regional collaboration also leads to efficiency, which can lead to more productivity. And of course, especially for our rural communities that have low capacity, having a network of people allows for increased succession planning, organizational succession, and expanded capacity. So that's just a few of the benefits. I'll be curious to hear what others we hear throughout the presentations, and feel free to throw more of those into the Jamboard. We have an opportunities section. Great, and so now I'm just going to pass it on to our speakers. We have John Stavney as well as Stephanie Gonzalez, both economic developers from their respective areas. So we are spanning the Northwest with John and the Southeast with Stephanie. And if we can just advance one more slide, I'll provide a little bit of background on John's background, but feel free to build on this, John. John has been the executive director of the Northwest Colorado Council of Governments, or COG, since 2016. Before that, he was the town manager in Eagle, and before that, an Eagle County commissioner for 5 years between 2008 and 2013. And he also served on the Town of Eagle Board of Trustees for 3 terms. He was an elected mayor in 2004, and he has also served on the Colorado River Water Conservation District. And before that, he was a superintendent and a project manager for building custom homes. So what a wealth of resources you have, not just for Eagle, John, but very impressed to read your bio and think about you providing that expertise across a region, not just in Eagle. I will let you take it from here.
Yeah, thanks, Marguerite. Let's go to the next slide. My history, I like to say, I've just found different ways to serve the community in different capacities, which I think is something I'm going to flip a little bit in this presentation. Go ahead and go to the next slide. One of the things that's interesting in serving in like a county or a town is how, we have 31 members in our region at COG, and each of them has a lot to do. The managers are often understaffed. A lot of the departments are understaffed, and that was especially true in the town setting. But in the excuse me, I have a cough thing I may have to shift from. But one thing I learned is you need to, this is common, I guess, thinking anymore within organizations, look across the silos to build a team. So whatever your project that you're trying to do, if you're trying to say, hey, this is just a planning department project, and you only look within that department, you're often going to miss the perspectives of what you need. And that goes for grabbing, whether it's citizens or whatnot. I think one of the best examples of that for us at COG has been in doing local broadband. I put a link in to this a series of reports, but one of which is this 10-year report that we put out of local broadband projects, Roaring Fork, Red Cliff or whatnot. And every one of these communities that has done a local broadband project has had a different local champion. In Red Cliff, it was a mayor who just insisted, look, we don't have cell service, we don't have internet service, and just wouldn't take no for an answer. Talked to the Forest Service, talked to state representatives, talked to congressional representatives, talked to COG. We eventually did get a person who is still with us, Nate Wallowitz, our broadband coordinator, now director, who helped kind of lead the charge with it. But up in Rio Blanco County, for instance, where we helped them with their local broadband project, really fantastic project out of Meeker, where they, passed a $20 million general bond for or general fund use for broadband a number of years ago, and they have a commitment to serve every resident in very, very rural Rio Blanco County. It was actually an IT director at the school district, right, who was the champion for that, who insisted we need to do this. So my main thing I want to add about looking across silos is you don't know where that's going to come from. In Grand County, it was a rural hospital district, and it was an IT director there who said, we want to get connected. In Clear Creek County, it was the county. But if you just expect it's going to be, hey, the county government it's going to be the town that's going to be the leader, you may miss out on an opportunity. So be aware, and many of these projects need local champions. So there's, in that broadband report, there's individual stories. There's not a template for getting local broadband done. And really, each one of them is sort of a tapestry of connections that get made and building a team from different jurisdictions who have an interest in this. And that's really been the story of broadband for us. Next slide, please. I wrote a piece, and there's a link to it here in our e-news. I did a series of COVID lessons, sort of newsletters writing about this. And, reflecting on when I was a commissioner at Eagle County, I came in right as, that recession in 2008 and 2009, and we had to cut 30% of our county budget and, 30% of our employee base. That was a $100 million budget that got cut to the 60 million or so. Very painful. But we were really, really focused. And, there's a side of the political spectrum that just says, hey, smaller government's better government. Maybe, I think it's worthwhile to think of things that way. But one thing I've seen cut over and over are, those having a meal before the council meets, right? Or one thing I noticed in the COVID lessons that I wrote about is counties that already had some, where they paid for coffee and donuts, right? For the emergency managers to get together with the communications directors for the different entities, whether it's the school district or the fire districts, and they met on a regular basis. And some people would say, hey, that's waste, right? They're just a bunch of bureaucrats getting together and having donuts and coffee, whatever the right food is these days to be eating, right? Vegan or whatever. But I want to just encourage that those relationship building meetings ahead of when you have challenges is really, really pennies on the dollar in terms of value. Many of our different counties have mayors and managers groups that meet on either a monthly, most of them meet on a quarterly basis, and they have an agenda and they talk. If you're familiar with emergency management functional groups, I don't like the formality of those so much, but like I said, the PIOs in Eagle County, for instance, we're already having a regular, hey, how can we support you when you have an incident, and they all get together. They're having those conversations months and years before things go down, right? To talk about disaster preparedness. So don't penny pinch on those relationships and the meetings required for it and the time required for it. Next slide. So one thing, when you start, trying to pull people together, I think if you have a success, it's good to have a success mindset, which you want to get to. But I think if you think it's going to be easy, one of my things I would just recommend is just expect it's going to be difficult, right? Expect that people are going to misunderstand your intent. Why do I want to get these entities together? Having been an elected leader, I know that when people don't know the story, something happens, it gets reported in the newspaper, people read the newspaper, and they connect the dots as to why things were decided and what happened, right? That's just a natural thing that people fill in the story. So you have to be aware of that people are going to, misunderstand, and you have to address that and have patience about it. It's a natural reaction. It's not something you're frustrated with. It's fight or flight. Well, organizations exist really to protect the status quo, right? This is why we have the silos. This is why we have what turns out to be bureaucracies that get sort of calcified and solidified. I'm thinking of a project that took almost my entire term as a county commissioner, the Eagle Valley Land Exchange. And it was a 13-party agreement using the state land board. And I just went down for a year and went to each state land board meeting. Got to learn how they think, watch the board members, what they're doing before we came before them, right? Develop those relationships, trying to understand, okay, how do they tick, right? And I remember going to the town of Minturn, who was a partner in this land exchange. They were very suspicious of the county's participation. I was a commissioner walking in, but I went multiple times in front of the meeting and said, here's the status of what's going on, here's what we're trying to do. Avon also, I remember hearing, oh, we're going to pull out of this thing. Just taking the time to again and again address those, and just expect it's going to take time and people are going to be skeptical of your intent. Next slide, please. I didn't check when I started, so I apologize if I'm already going over. one thing that is important is to understand you may not be the right point person. The person who you think of being the leader of a group, like it should be the mayor if it's about the town, or it should be, the manager of the county or the fire chief or whatever. When you put a group together and you're trying to assemble it, sometimes you got to kind of step back and look and go, who are they going to listen to? Who has buy-in, who has trust, and allow that person or that entity to lead, right? To facilitate and have it go a different way than you might want it to go. We have different ways of talking about this kind of thing. It's code shifting, understand how different folks are think, having emotional intelligence, situational awareness is used in different ways, speak their language. One thing I've learned regionally at COG is if you have a really good idea, and I'm always listening and watching and scanning for, hey, this is a great innovative idea, I'd like to share that with our jurisdictions, and they should be doing it. But if I come to Northwest COG and announce this is a great idea from Boulder, the city of Boulder, I immediately know about half of my constituents are going to go, yuck, that's not for us. There's no way that could apply to us. And it's interesting, even some of the nuances of, Breckenridge is competitive with Vail, is competitive with Aspen. And if you go to Breck and you say, hey, this idea came from Vail, they're immediately like, against it. So not to lie to people, but sometimes you go, okay, how do I present this? How are they going to take it? What format should it come in? And just be aware of that, whether it's the speaker or how you come to an idea. Next strategy, please. Next slide. And talking about that mayor manager meeting format before, one thing I noticed is we met when I was commissioner for a number of years, and the mayor manager thing kind of petered out because we kept taking on these huge topics and maybe even things that weren't within our weren't actionable for us. Interest kind of waned because people go to a lot of meetings over time and they go, hey, is something going to come out of this or not? So when you're trying to put together a coalition or a group across jurisdictions, collaborating and whatnot, make sure you come up with things that they can do something about and sidestep those political, I call them tar pit issues, if you need to, and go to the things that you're going to have some buy-in on. You can always find things that different jurisdictions have to talk about and maybe act upon that they have a common interest in the community. And maybe you just start with information sharing. You start behind the scenes, frankly. Hey, could we have a conversation? What if I brought these people into the room? Do you think it would work if I brought, Marguerite and James and Randy and Margie in to talk about this? And somebody goes, well, I don't know. You might not have put these two people in the room. How about that? And, you need to be sensitive to that. And then over time, as the group starts to work, I think it's important to start to build a narrative of what the group's trying to do and what's trying to accomplish and celebrate that. I think that's my last slide. So I know that was a whirlwind. I'll stop there and let Stephanie kind of go. Those were just different strategies that I've come across for building regional collaboration.
Great, thank you, John. And I will briefly introduce Stephanie so we can make sure we get to discussion. Please, again, feel free to use the chat or the Jamboard. But Stephanie has a background from this region, and to John's point, really rooted in her region in the Southeast for the Southeast Colorado enterprise development. And you've been the executive director since 2015 and really worked your way up from finance and office director to this executive director. So with that, I'll pass it on to you, Stephanie.
Thank you. My name is Stephanie Gonzalez. I am the director of the SECED and Council of Governments. I've been the representative, as Marguerite said, for quite a little while now, and I'm honored to be part of this to speak about our collaboration as it exists in Southeast Colorado. We have 6 counties and 25 municipalities that make up our planning region. We've been fortunate to have these counties and municipalities as members for over 35 years. So of course, over those years, we've worked with lots of different funding groups, OEDIT, Division of Housing, CDOT, all to be able to offer valuable programs that have been part of our region for many years. So our business loan fund, housing rehab, enterprise zone, and transportation planning, things that have actually been able to encourage participation from our membership to be members of a really good group that provides valuable programs for residents of their counties and municipalities. But as a result of these relationships, we've been able to build public and private partnerships that promote resiliency in our region. Our local stakeholders have been just phenomenal in supporting regional and economic development efforts, in addition to their own county and local economic developers for the region. So groups such as SCCED, CCOG, the SABRIA, which is the Business Retention, Expansion, and Attraction Group, as well as all of our local economic developers who are listed on this slide. Next slide, please. So with, go to the developing a compelling story. So beginning with the start of the pandemic, our local economic developers, which I would say is a very fierce group of individuals, we've been fondly referred to as the Southeast Mafia, and we wear that badge proudly because we are the group that gets together and says, we're going to address what is going on in the region and bring it to our stakeholders and say, all right, we need to identify these things and how we're going to work on them. So we began addressing the economic issues that arose as a result of the pandemic. And some of these things had already existed, but they became more evident as we went further and further into the pandemic. Conversations such as creating a single point of contact in the region to distribute information, to how do we address the housing issue that we're having, business relief through CARES. All of these were important conversations that we started to have. And we started this with a weekly meeting of economic developers, and it's continued to this day. We continue to do that. Every month, we have 18 stakeholders who meet and discuss current and future needs. At these monthly meetings, we have discussions with not only the individual needs of the counties and municipalities that are members, but of course, those that are similar that we can all tackle together. So we talk about priorities that affect everyone as much as possible, and then we discuss goals for tackling them. We know that collectively we can create economies of scales, as we've done with our workforce housing development project, and we've been able to promote capacity building by working with our economic development district, local governments, local developers, economic developers. And we feel because of this, we've been able to achieve what no one else has been able to achieve. We've had 83 units spanning 6 counties and 10 municipalities go into being built. And we were able to do this through local stakeholders putting their money forward to address the horizontal infrastructure that made it possible for a developer to go vertical. This is huge. As you know, sometimes we have communities that don't play well with counties, municipalities and counties don't always have that great relationship, but in our region, to make these projects happen, they've had to really come to the table and put their individual differences aside and say, yep, we're doing this. Let's go to the next slide. I'm going to make it quick because I know we're getting close on time. Positivity and partnerships, you know, positivity is important, but it's good to bring all kinds of people to the table, like-minded, and even those who have differing opposing perspectives. It's great to see both sides and through different lenses. This experience and knowledge that they might bring to the table helps us to maybe build that knowledge of we've been there, done that, didn't work. But yet, you know, it brings us together to know, okay, this is what we have to work on and create that atmosphere of positivity. We can make it work. And sometimes the attitude of, oh, this will never work we can become our worst enemy. So we really work hard to try to avoid that. We also encourage, I am my brother's keeper. So let's prop each other up. Let's help each other out. smaller communities sometimes cannot come to the table with as much as a larger community. And that's what we really focus on. We've got to have that "we got your back" mentality. And then if you'll go to the last or the 5th slide there, be ready to present your story. We build our story. We say, hey, this is what we have, but we can't only just give it to the state and the rest of the world. We got to make sure that we're selling it in our own region. And that's huge for us, because if you don't have the backup, the support, and everybody saying, talking the same story, then it's harder to actually sell it out to the rest of the world. So we're not afraid to be the squeaky wheel. That's how we've gotten our projects done. And I feel like we have great collaboration in rural communities in our area. We say outreach, outreach, outreach. People cannot know what we're facing if we don't tell our story. And that's one of the things that we really focus on. We find people who are educated about what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish. And we say, let's help everybody tell the story. That's about all I have. I know I made mine fairly quick because I know we got to leave. My economic development partners, couldn't do it without them. That little group helps us do everything that we need to do out of our office. And it's really important to build those relationships. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And I see a lot of great thoughts going into the Jamboard. So I'm going to actually ask everyone who wants to, see you're ahead of time, Stephanie, my alarm's going off. Anyone who wants to participate in the rest of this discussion, feel free to turn your cameras on. Feel free to drop things in the chat. And I'm just going to refer to some of the questions we had prepared, as well as the Jamboard. You know, it was great to hear some of the themes around relationship building that you have, and around local champions, being a squeaky wheel, having that Southeast Mafia. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about how you really elevate those voices and how you might delegate rather than trying to take everything on yourselves, and you know, how you really prioritize with a group of very, very different and diverse folks.
When we meet weekly, you know, we bring things to the table that we're like a sounding board. And sometimes it is more about a support system and saying, okay, I can help you with this, or it might be something that they can help me with. They've already done things that I'm trying to accomplish on a regional level. Some individual projects, we try not to recreate a wheel. If someone already has the idea and it's working well for them, we build upon what they're doing, and we say, all right, let's work on this more on a regional basis because it works great in your area. And the people that I work with these economic developers are just phenomenal in sharing ideas and how to get things done. So it's really important for us to have this conversation weekly. And then we report, our economic developers meet with our stakeholders twice a month at the Sabria meeting and then at my SCCED meetings. And we have 3 representatives from each county at those meetings every month, or every meeting that we have, so twice a month. So it is just really a great way to delegate, you know, our tasks and help each other succeed in what we're trying to do.
Great. I'm going to transition. I know we have extended this session to be 5 minutes later because of the technical difficulties at the beginning. So we have 5 more minutes. And one of the themes I'm seeing in the Jamboard, and so anyone is welcome to jump in here who's been dropping these into the chat, but is around equity. And, you know, one of the challenges being working effectively with large groups, but also the voices that are not at the table. I see a really great resource on the scorecard on Prosperity Now's scorecard data, as well as an ESRI diversity index. And, you know, one of the opportunities really being able to work with tribal leaders. So John, Stephanie, or really anyone from the group who wants to chime in, how are you really doing that work of hearing diverse voices and bringing them to the table?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The diversity, equity, inclusion, format is a relatively new thing, and have a lot of respect for it. But having been somebody who came to a small town and then quickly became mayor, I think it stands whether I don't know about you're measuring it that way, but you really need somebody who's got a sensitivity and looking around the room and seeing who's not speaking, seeing just the really the power dynamics of a discussion. You probably saw I went over my time. I can be a very powerful speaker kind of person, but even when I'm in a different role, I need to kind of step back and go, I'm not speaking, right? My point is to be facilitating and eyes up and being aware. And some of those voices, you can't bring out very well in a meeting. You sometimes need to go outside of that and say, hey, it looked like you had a lot of thoughts or ideas. I was watching you. Can we bring that in? How can we bring that in? Some of those conversations need to happen before meetings. You set them up, and maybe you advocate for voices. You say, hey, Stephanie, we had a conversation, great conversation a week ago, and you have these points. You want to elaborate on those, right? You kind of pull people in. And so I think there's, and then you also need to ask a question who's not in the room. And I don't know that we do that often enough. In our Western Colorado communities, if you don't have specifically a Hispanic contingent in the room, you're missing out on 50% of your population, and you'd be very aware of that. So, and anyhow, that's maybe a more tactical answer to that.
Yeah, that's really valuable. Feel free to jump in, Stephanie.
Yeah, in our communities, I feel like I'm bilingual, so I do have that advantage, John. If there's someone that does attend that does not understand, they can ask questions, or they can call me. Sometimes you get people who don't want to ask the question in the room, but I get the phone call and they ask questions. Our smaller communities, you always have that mentality of, well, only the bigger community gets to have a voice at the table. We really try to reach out to these smaller communities and say, we need your representation at our table in order to be able to get that you included in what we're trying to do. And in our housing project, for example, the larger communities, our two largest communities got the least amount of housing, and we're able to support our smaller communities through their funding. Nobody put in more than 8.5% of their donation, from the ARPA funds. With the small communities, they got a lot more housing, a lot more bang for the buck, and they saw this. They understood that, Lamar paid for Grenada to have this opportunity to have housing. Grenada has phenomenal, great things happening right now with workforce. But yeah, bringing them to the table, Grenada felt like they were able to take advantage of a program, and they were heard because we need housing. We have 30 new jobs here, and we need people or places to put people. And Prowers County and City of Lamar, stepped up and they put money towards that infrastructure. And it was just amazing. People felt like they were being listened to, and that's important to all of us. Even the diversity, like I said, we've had a lot of people who are inquiring on those homes that are Spanish speaking, and we're able to also let them know what's going on and how to access this housing as well. So, just making it accessible to everyone is really important to all of us, and making sure that everybody's represented in a good way.
Yeah, that's all great thoughts. I really appreciate that. I'm just going to highlight some other really great notes that I'm seeing in the Jamboard, and James, feel free to jump in. I'm not sure when they're going to give us the hook to bring us back to the main room, but I'll use all the time we have since this is recorded. I really see a theme here around the flexibility of grants not always being what you want them to be, or laws preventing flexibility around projects and results. I think both of those challenges or I wishes are really relevant to some of this work, and really, trying to make the right connections, not just going after all of the funding at this time of historic funding. And yeah, finding those local leaders, bringing on more people. I see a comment here that I feel like might be really directed to the state. Just saying, the lack of collaboration internally before going out and doing it externally. I think it's really hard when you have a cruise ship sized organization to really have all of the outreach that needs to be equitable, to have all of that outreach be coordinated, which I'm sure the larger the region, the harder that could be. Any other thoughts before we wrap up?
It looks like we only have about 20 seconds left.
Oh, great.
No worries whatsoever. Just thank you everyone for your time.